AM Joy. When covering the Trump administration, not a week seems to go by without some bombshell jaw-dropping development in the Trump-Russia controversy. This week certainly delivered when we learned that the Trump campaign at its highest levels sought to collude with the Russian government to damage Hillary Clinton during the 2016 election. Tuesday was the biggest news day of the week, the day the president's eldest son, Donald Trump Jr., released emails that showed the campaign was eager to accept the Russian government's help. This is how our network, as well as CNN, led that coverage that night.
Our breaking news, the president's eldest son reveals what he, his father, and everyone in the Trump orbit has denied for more than a year now.
We have to figure out what is going to happen next, what ought to happen next, what is likely to happen next, now that the Trump campaign has admitted that they worked with the Russians.
On Tuesday night, Fox News also covered the controversy in a big way, with Trump Jr. himself joining Sean Hannity for an exclusive interview, but not before Hannity offered a muddled monologue about how the real story was about, wait for it, Ukraine.
For all the members of the Destroy Trump media that have to tune into my show tonight, get out your pad and your pen. You may actually learn a thing or two. And the question you people in the media need to start asking yourselves is, why don't you tell the American people every story? For example, back in January, the Politico, hardly members of the right-wing conspiracy, published this explosive report, quote, Ukrainian efforts to sabotage Trump backfire.
What alternate planet is Fox News occupying? Some people have an answer to that. It's called Earth 2, the parallel universe where there is no Russiagate, and the real villains are Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Loretta Lynch, and of course, the media. And joining me now is Karine Jean-Pierre of MoveOn.org, political consultant Fernand Amandi, equal rights attorney and advocate Tamara Holder, MSNBC contributor Kurt Eichenwald, and Herb London of the London Center for Policy Research. Thank you all for being here. And Tamara, I got to come to you first because you have been a Fox News contributor, so you know what it's like over there. And I want to play for you a little mashup of some of the reactions to Russiagate on Friday. Take a look.
Everybody wants to talk about Russia, but Russia doesn't affect anybody.
Instead of pointing the finger at Donald Trump Jr. saying maybe he's colluding, big word, colluding with the Russians, maybe the Russians were colluding with Hillary Clinton to get information on Donald Trump.
Let's talk a little bit about the number one story on the other channels, and that's Russia. It looks like collusion. As it turns out, the Russia story is starting to fall apart because it looks like she was just a lobbyist. And she met with a whole bunch of members of Congress and State Department officials and members of the press and Washington hoi polloi trying to push this Russian adoption thing, right?
Tamara, it's like the Earth 2 Brady Bunch. Russia. I mean, why is it that you think that in this sort of alternate media universe there is no Russiagate? It doesn't exist.
Well, I'm going to throw a curveball at you. I think that we're the ones who are living in the bubble. I think that that Fox News viewers are there. They're stuck there. They aren't going anywhere, and they're mad at the mainstream media. They're mad at us here at CNN and MSNBC because there is no conversation about jobs. We can talk about social issues all day long. We can talk about Black Lives Matter, important. We can talk about LGBT issues, important. We can talk about Syria refugees, important. The opioid addiction, important. We can talk all about these things. But until we have these little, these finger issues and we attach it to the main issue, which is jobs, nobody is going to listen to us because the jobs of America have left. People are hurting. And until we understand the plight of the American people, Hillary Clinton's DNC convention talking about all those things that I just talked about are not going to resonate with the American people. And that's where Fox News has it right. And that's where we have it wrong. And we need to understand that people want to work. There are gay Republicans. There are Republicans who have lost their lives to gun violence, but they want to work and put food on the table. And until we understand that, and we understand it, and we talk about it, they are going to be over there.
And okay, I want to go to Fernand on that and get you to respond to that, because there's some polling out now that even in what they call Trump counties where Trump carried, and this is released just this morning. I want to say this is our NBC poll, guys, producers. Strongly approve of Donald Trump 29, strongly disapprove is at 35. His approval 50% in Trump counties. Let's go to the next one, and these are the counties that were polled in the NBC poll. 439 Trump counties. It is consists of GOP, Democrats, and Independents: Colorado, Florida, Georgia, et cetera. You can see the map right there. Now let's look at flip counties versus surge counties. These are surge counties, meaning Romney won them and Trump won them, or flip counties, meaning Obama won them and then Trump won them. In flip counties, Donald Trump's approval rating is 44, his disapproval is 51. In surge counties, it's flipped, it's 56-40. So, Fernand, it doesn't look as if Donald Trump is weathering the storm, even in some Trump counties. Is that because there's not enough action on the economy, or is that because a lot of Americans are actually quite concerned that a foreign government might have helped elect this guy?
I think you said it best, Joy. Here on planet Earth, and what I like to still think is the United States of reason, where facts matter, where good journalism matters, we see what's happening before us. You just talked about it. A hostile foreign government has penetrated our election. We now have undisputable proof of collusion between the Russian government and the Trump campaign, something that the campaign all along denied that happened. That was a lie, another lie. The problem is it's easy to cast this issue, Joy, as those folks on the other side watching Fox News are in this state of denial. I think that's being charitable. It's not a state of denial. It's a state of bad faith. And the question that I ask, and I think all Americans of conscience who are trying to put country over party should ask, Joy, is why? Why do they continue to ignore the obvious? When we were told all along by this lying administration that there was no collusion, there was no meeting between representatives of the Russian government, we find out on Friday that a former Soviet counterintelligence officer was part of that meeting. And I think it speaks beyond this denial and delusion. It's bad faith. And the bad faith that we're seeing at play here, Joy, I think has a very sinister component to it. It can only mean that this involvement goes even broader and deeper than we first suspected.
And I mean, Kurt, I want to get you in on this as well, because, you deal with a fair amount of interaction with those on the right who are very angry, who seem to be very exercised about the idea that the mainstream media is focusing on this Russia investigation. You've been reporting on this story. Do you feel, and to take Tamara's point seriously, that this is as important, or in its own sort of set of, is it as important as reporting day to day on the economy, or is there something sui generis about what happened in 2016 in your view?
I'm going to be very blunt. I think her point was ridiculous. And because we're talking about a situation where it seems like nobody understands what happened, certainly not Fox News. We were subject to an act of war. This was not some little computer problem. This act of war has been done by Russia against England, the Netherlands. It has been done against Italy. It has been done against France. The entire purpose, our American intelligence agencies know, is to drive a web and break apart the Western alliances. Now, yes, it would be nice to talk about jobs. We are in a war. And the problem with the Trump administration and the propagandists at Fox News is they look at this only through the prism of what does it mean for Trump? What does it mean for the Republican Party? I truthfully don't care what it means for Trump, because I believe that we as a nation need to be focused on what do we do about the enemy? What do we do to preserve American democracy? And if everybody gets, unfortunately, you do have the fact that Trump is a propaganda, I'm sorry, not Trump, Fox is a propaganda network. It functions off of the idea of breaking people up into teams. So they are aiding and abetting the enemy. They are aiding and abetting those people we are currently at war with. The Russians, in order to play for their team, to make it GOP versus Democrats. It's not. It is the United States of America versus people who are a country that is trying to destroy our democracy, break up the Western alliance, and in the process, Fox News is saying, Don't worry about the Russians. Don't worry about the people trying to attack democracy. Let's attack instead the intelligence agencies giving us these conclusions. Let's pretend the Democrats are involved, and let's return to tax cuts. It's obscene, it is propaganda, and it has to stop. And the Republican Party, which unfortunately Jennifer Rubin, a conservative, wrote this morning, is in opposition to reality. The Republican Party has to take over and decide whether or not they're going to allow the propaganda to drive democracy or whether they're going to side with America and help fight this enemy.
And you know, and I'm going to let Tamara respond in a minute, but I want to go to Herb on this because, Herb, you wrote a book that the title is Leading from Behind, and it talks about this idea of America ceding global leadership in the world. I presume it is sort of a hit on Obama and Barack Obama and the way he conducted foreign policy, but it is sort of striking to me, this idea that what all of our intelligence agencies have described as an act of war. Vladimir Putin does not mean America any good. He wants to dismantle American leadership in the world. That is a sort of a war, and Republicans have argued for a long time that the problem with Democrats is that Democrats won't recognize that we are at war. Unfortunately, they want to say we're at war with Islam, but essentially that we're at war and that we just don't recognize it. I want to play you. It is striking to me that you have now Republicans essentially denying that we are essentially being made war upon in terms of the cyber attack on our country. And here's Tucker Carlson doing that thing. He's talking to Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters, who is also a conservative, who's a Fox News commentator, on Tuesday. This is an extraordinary exchange. Take a listen.
I'm not vouching for Putin's character, which he seems like a shady guy, a strong man for sure, wouldn't want to live there.
He's a killer.
Hard to see why he's a threat to us. And how many wars can we fight at once? How many people can we be in opposition to at once? Why not just accept that people who are bad people share our interests and side with them?
You sound like Charles Lindbergh in 1938 saying Hitler hasn't attacked us.
I beg your pardon? Slow down. Hey, slow down, Colonel. I'm not in any way. You cannot compare me to someone who would make apologies for Hitler. And I don't think Putin is comparable to Hitler.
I think Putin is. Look,
I think it's a grotesque overstatement.
Putin is, well, I think
it's insane.
Putin, fine. You can think it's insane all you want.
You just compared me to a Nazi apologist because I asked a simple question, which is, slow down. Why does it contravene American interest to make common cause with a group that's trying to kill ISIS?
And Herb, he went on to say well, we made common cause with Stalin to fight Hitler, and implied that America doesn't have a problem with that. Yeah, well, the Cold War came after that. But do you find it extraordinary? We just had Vladimir Kara-Murza on describing how venal and how violent the Putin regime is. It does not mean us any good. Isn't it odd for Republicans to say that is not that big of a deal?
It is a big deal. Look, I'm very much concerned about Vladimir Putin and his motives. And quite obviously, in foreign policy matters, our interests diverge with the Russians. But there may be some areas where we converge. And certainly fighting terrorism might be one of them. And when you draw the conclusion that the American people in a poll are opposed to the Trump administration because of these Russian stories, I don't believe that for a moment. I don't think most people really care. I think when you come back to it, it is true. It is true. Let me just finish this point, if I may. It is true that when you look at the blue curtain, the reason why it was penetrated by the Republicans was in large part because the Democrats ignored people who had lost their jobs and by and large felt that Washington, D.C. was not responsive. The Republican Party did respond in some fashion to what was going on. Again, to suggest that there's a war going on at the moment, yes, of course, our interests and the Russian interests are not likely to converge. As Lord Palmerston pointed out in the 19th century, Russians have their interests, we have our interests. They are not likely to converge except in some areas.
Okay, well, let me go to Kareem, because they are converging in a lot of ways. Donald Trump agrees that the Russians should get back their spy compounds. He wants to have a cybersecurity initiative partnership with them. Right. He seems to want to make our interests converge with Russia. Does it, the argument that's being made, in a sense, by Tamara and by Herb, is that Democrats are the ones making the mistake because the American people don't care about that. If the American people don't care about that, isn't that a problem?
Well, so here's the thing about, I want to respond to what he said. Look, Republicans spent 8 years of Obama's administration basically being the no party, and it got them nowhere, because now we're in 6 months into 2017, and what do we see? They can't even govern. They have the most unpopular pieces of legislation that they can't even get out of Congress. And here's the thing, just to step back for a second here, I mean, you have a president who's getting his daily policy and his intelligence briefing from Fox News, which is essentially has become a state-run media at this point. And so there aren't enough adjectives to talk about to really describe how bad this all is. It is shameful. It is dangerous. It is disgusting what's happening right now. And so we are stepping into a place that is incredibly dangerous when you have the president of the United States who wants to be buddies with an adversary, who wants to take away potentially sanctions, who won't admit that our 17 intelligence agencies are correct that there was a cyber attack on our democracy.
Yeah, and who may invite him to the White House? Who's talking about doing it? And Tamara, I want to come back to you because your name was invoked, so I think you should have a chance to respond. I mean, it strikes me as odd for any American to say that it is not a big enough deal that Russia may have helped pick our president, that's not a big enough deal to spend more time on that than to talk about, the economy. I don't know. I find that odd.
Well, the thing is, first of all, I think maybe a lot of your viewers don't know that I'm a Democrat who worked at Fox News. So I understand the viewership there. I understand the plight of the American people, especially the viewers there. And we can talk about Russia all day long and all the other issues I just brought up that are social issues. And yes, I'm not disputing the fact that any of those things are true, that Russia or false. But the point is why, and as Herb said, the curtain was penetrated. Why did people go there? Why are people not listening here? Because they feel as if we are not listening to them, and everybody in America wants to put food on the table at the end of the day. They don't care about Syrian refugees if they can't feed their family.
Wow. Right, but I have to, and Fernand, you worked in talk radio, among many other talents. You also did work in conservative talk radio, so you have experienced this with your callers. I've been on your show, so I know you have. This idea, I don't know, I wonder, did after Pearl Harbor people say, let's move on and let's stop talking about Japan?
Joy, you took the words out of my mouth. Can you imagine if after 9/11, and I think the coverage of 9/11 was wall-to-wall, appropriately as it should have been for months, if not even years, on the nature of that attack on American soil. As Kurt spoke of, this is a different type of attack, but it is an attack nonetheless. And what that attack has done, Joy, it has tainted the legitimacy of this administration. It's no longer a question of smoke. There is fire there. Those fire in the name of lies that the administration has tried to get us to swallow, which have now been provable lies based on the great reporting that outlets like NBC, the Washington Post, and the New York Times has done. But this idea that we're going to talk about jobs and other issues that are absolutely important against the backdrop of the specter of the third great attack on American soil of a different sort is ridiculous. And I think that's why the polling today sees the president at 36% approval rating, amongst the lowest that have ever been measured this early into an administration.
I think Kurt was trying to get it. Go on. Yes, Kurt.
Yeah, I think one of the things we got to do, and I love what was just said, I think one of the big problems here is that all of our allies recognize we're in a war. Only America, and I don't mean the Trump administration, I mean America, is too dumb to understand we're in a war. I'm sorry, I'm going to be blunt. And yeah, they're being fed a lot of...
That's ridiculous. To call the American people dumb is the most losing argument ever. To minimize the people of America is...
I'm not trying to win a political race. Hold on. And this is now where I was going to go to. Every time people are opening their mouths, in this thing is, what about politics? What about politics? What about politics? I'm not saying the average American is dumb. I'm saying we are. I'm saying the people who don't understand that this is a war, that our intelligence agencies recognize it's a war, that the Defense Intelligence Agency recognizes it's a war, that our allies recognize that it's a war. And people are saying, well, it's not a politically winning argument. Who cares? It's exactly like 9/11. 9/11's not a politically winning argument. This is worse than 9/11 because it is an attack on the functioning of democracy.
And I wonder if I can raise a point.
Well, we're out of time, but Herb, very quickly, if you can be very quick.
Well,
because we are really out of
if
time.
we are at war, I mean, I wonder why President Obama said when the mic was off. We're going to be a lot more flexible than we were in the past.
Who cares? What about Obama? What about Obama is a losing and lame argument? Barack Obama is gone.
Well, I'm not
you
sure
have
that's
to
a
let
losing
him go.
argument.
You have to release him into the universe. Let him go. And I'm just going to say, and not to editorialize, but if the legitimacy of the President of the United States is even in question, that is fundamentally more important than the current GDP. It is so foundational to whether we are a democracy or not. Did we pick our own president?
Exactly.
I just, I have to say that as an American, I don't, I would prefer one party to the other, fine. But I want us to pick them. We should pick our president. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to leave it at there.
Amen.
Karine and Fernand will be back. Thank you very much, all of us who joined us. Tamara Holder, appreciate you. Kurt Eichenwald, thank you. Herb London, thank you. Hope you guys will all come. Hope you'll come back, Herb. We appreciate you being